So this last week I've been working on a game called Floating Point, which is a kind of a relaxing, semi-relaxing game about swinging through randomly generated spaces and trying to do that fluidly and seamlessly. And I've probably spent about 6 days on it in total. It's been a while since I started it, but I took about 3 days off in the middle to go and show heat signature to some people and to work on that, and I had a big breakthrough on that, so I'm making good progress there. But I came back to Floating Point and I'm kind of at a stage now where I'm getting ready to release it soonish. It's going through a last stage of testing, but it turned into more than what it was originally going to be, so I thought I'd explain that a little bit. Because it started as a Ludum Dare entry. So Ludum Dare is a game making competition, and the theme for this iteration of it was Beneath the Surface. And my idea for a Beneath the Surface game was something focused around the water level, where you would have a movement mechanic that you could use above water and below water, and it would feel different depending on which section you were in. And the movement mechanic I thought of was a grappling hook, and I was already working on a game that had a grappling hook in it, so I just tried modding that to have water in it, and then I made a random level generator for it, which just put blocks in random places in a sort of tank-shaped 2D level, and tried messing around with the grappling hook in that and had it splashing into water and pulling you down, fighting your own buoyancy, and it turned out to be really fun, and I enjoyed messing around with it. I guess I could have just entered that, because Ludum Dare is supposed to be 2 days, and I wasn't really properly entering it because I didn't have 2 days free. It was a busy weekend, so I only had like 1 day, and at the end of that 1 day, what I had was not... You could play with it and it was fine, and I guess if I'd made it from scratch that weekend, I probably would have been happy with it and ready to enter it, but actually the grappling hook was like months of work because I was learning Unity as I was making that. So I wasn't satisfied with my progress yet. I felt like that, you know, I'm kind of getting somewhere, but this isn't it yet. I need to carry on with this. And so I gave it like 1 more day, and if you saw the last video I did of it, it was pretty much showed that process, and then I reached a point where I wasn't ready to put it out still because the difficulty of it needed tuning, or it needed to be variable, or it needed something so that the way I play it could be different to the way other people play it, because I've been using this grappling hook for 6 months of my life now, so I know how to use it inside out. So if I design a level that's challenging enough for me, then it would be way too challenging for a completely new player, and then as that new player gets better, they'll need different levels of challenge and stuff, and that was just complicated. So one of the difficulties of it was that it's the way it assesses your performance is all based in this one single scoring system, and that came about because I was trying to figure out how to incentivize the coolest kind of movement. I always think, like, particularly when you review games, you get to see a good spectrum of like good to bad, and it always, the very worst games are games in which no fun thing is possible as far as you can see. After a reasonable effort to try and do a fun thing anywhere, in any way, you can't find anything fun to do in this game, or good, whatever kind of goodness the game might be aiming for. That's like level 0. And then level 1 is a game where fun things are possible, or good things are possible, whatever it is the game wants you to get out of it. And it's possible to do that thing, but it's not actually it's not the best thing to do if you want to progress or achieve the goals that the game gives you, if it gives you any. In other words, the coolest thing to do is not the most effective thing to do, and the most effective thing to do is not good enough. It's boring compared to the cool stuff. And Gunpoint's guilty of that in lots of ways, but luckily, because Gunpoint's fiction is about spies and secret agents, for people like me, it's still fun to do the non-optimal thing because there's a fictional reason to do that. Like, I want to be the cool spy who never is seen by anybody, or I want to be the super violent psychopath who does crazy things. But in a purely abstract game, it's not really good enough if there's no reason to do the fun thing. It's nice, it's not worthless if you can do a fun thing, but it's not ideal. So I feel like level 2 is where you can do a fun thing, and it's the best thing to do. Like, the game is asking you to do it, and it rewards you for doing it, and it doesn't reward something less fun more. In other words, the more fun what you're doing is, the more the game rewards you, and the more the game encourages it. And so, for Floating Point, I needed it. I mean, I didn't really have time to kind of make it into anything big. It wasn't going to have a story. It wasn't going to have, like, anything hand-built or anything custom about it. I felt like I could save a lot of time by skipping any kind of fiction, any kind of setting, any kind of context, and just keep it purely abstract, just keep it purely about this movement, because that was the thing that was good about it, and then layer onto that something that would encourage the kind of movement I felt was good, that I was enjoying when I was playing about with it as a purely non-motivated toy. And that movement was basically swinging around, picking up a lot of speed, and then not losing that speed, preferably not hitting anything. And if you do hit something, not losing too much of your speed and kind of recovering from it and trying to turn that into picking your speed back up, and just keeping that going. Not forever, but just for, you know, a decent amount of time. That was what felt good about it. And so the cheapest, laziest, simplest, crudest way to incentivize anything in a game is to put a score on it. And I was fine with that, because this is a jam game, and even when it stopped being a jam game, it was kind of a short game. It needed to be something I could make quickly. So in the absence of any better way to incentivize that kind of movement, I thought, let's just give you points for doing that. So the point system became a kind of running multiplier, that every time you pick up one of the collectibles in the game, you get an amount of points that's proportional to this multiplier. And that multiplier is just a number that is always being increased by your velocity. So every frame of the game is adding your velocity to this running total. But it's also decaying by a steady amount each frame. So the decay rate is like 30, and if your speed is less than 30, then you build up no multiplier at all. If your speed is over 30, you're building up whatever the difference between the two things is. So if your speed is 60, then you're building up 30 per frame, so that's quite good. And then on top of that, it has a sort of proportional penalty for if bars get really, the collectibles are bars and they increase in size as you're swinging around. If they get really huge, then they start to decay faster, because I was finding there was an exploit, kind of an exploit, where you could get a really, really good run, and because you're very fast for a short amount of time, those bars would be so huge that it would take a long time to decay, even when you're stationary. So you could then fuck up and completely play clumsily, and you'd still have all these huge bars around that you could collect at your leisure, and that didn't feel good. So it needed to have larger bars decay faster. So the better you're doing, the more decay you have to deal with, and so the better you have to keep doing. And if you do screw up, it's not the end of the world, but your multiplier is lost and you have to build it up again. And that feels really good. It also penalizes you for bumping into things, so you get a kind of, as well as the velocity you lose. You don't actually lose that much velocity because you bounce pretty well, but you also get a penalty just for hitting things, because hitting things really is the flow breaker. That's the thing that feels like you failed, even if you didn't get penalized for it. So you lose like 20% of your current multiplier if you bump into anything. And if you bump into like two things quickly, then you lose pretty much all of it. And certainly if you rest on a surface, then it's just all the bars go down straight away. And that worked pretty well, I think. I couldn't ever find any way of playing the game that got you good points but wasn't fun. Every way that got you a good multiplier and you're able to pick up these things, traveling around this randomly generated level, picking up these bars, if it felt good, it scored well, and if it didn't feel good, it didn't score well. Those two things were in perfect sync. So the next thing I needed was this difficulty problem, which was that if I randomly generate a very busy level, then getting between all the little fiddly gaps is very difficult. And if I randomly generate a big sparse level, it's very, very easy just to do big sweeping swings and wrap yourself around these tiny blocks in this big open space, pick up loads of speed and fling yourself around and get these bars as they're huge. And both those things are kind of a problem, because for any given player at any given skill level, there's going to be an amount of density that you can cope with, but is challenging, and that's where it feels really good. Swinging around completely freely without any danger of bumping into anything doesn't feel good. It's spectacular to look at, but you don't have these moments of beautiful motion, which is where you've arced your swing around just so that you graze just over the top of a block and then duck just under another one just in time to kind of latch onto another thing and curve your trajectory around to avoid more obstacles and collect more bars. That feels amazing, and when you pull that off, and particularly if it's close shaves, and particularly when you know the penalty for hitting this thing would be harsh, you get the huge thrill of just feeling like what you're doing is elegant and masterful and exciting and fun. And so the sparse levels are kind of no fun if you're any good at it, and the dense levels are no fun if you're not brilliant at it. So everyone would have a different level on that scale they need to kind of settle into. but there's also loads and loads of other factors. There's the decay rate of those bars makes a massive difference to the game, because if it's twice as much as the default, then not only does that penalise you harshly when you're travelling fast, you're getting less points in general because that decay rate is always counting against it, but also you just, until you get up to 60, I don't know, pixels per second or whatever it is, then you're getting nothing at all. So it feels like you can't even get off the ground. So that's terrible for a new player. And so I was thinking maybe that needs tweaking for new players as well. And then there's the penalty for bumping into things. That can be reduced for people who are bad at that. And there are all these different factors going into it, as I told you the formula basically. So you can tell there's a lot of elements that could be changed, and each one is going to have a big effect on how the game feels and how it plays and how hard it is. And I was kind of getting into a bit of a mess about, like, what do I let you change, what do I change for you, and what should stay the same at all times. And I had a break at that point to go and go to a friend's house and play that Numenera campaign that I'm playing with Chris Thurston and Graham Smith and Marsh Davis, which is awesome. And came back and decided, okay, I need to get this thing done. And the simplest way to do this is I'm going to lock down what the decay rate is. I'm going to lock down what the penalty for bumping into things is. I have my own ideas about what feels good in that. And the retraction speed of your rope as well, because that determines a lot about how much speed you can pick up. I'm going to lock all those things down, and then the only thing I'm going to let you vary is the density of the levels, but I will let you vary it. So if you just complete a level, then I give you the option to go to one that has higher density or lower density. And the higher density ones are harder, but they you can potentially get more points because they just have, every block has a bar on it, and a bar is what gives you the points. So the more of them there are, the higher the score potential. And that kind of worked. I think it does work. But it took quite a long time, because I was suddenly having to make levels that were kind of make level transitions and let you go between them. And I had this cool system for that, where the next level you're going to play is in the background of the current level. So when you press a button to go to it, then it zooms you into the background of the level you're currently playing. And if you want to go to a less dense level, then you pull back, and a new level comes from behind you, and you go into that. And it was cool, but it took quite a while. And at some point, maybe half intentionally, maybe half forgetfully, I realised I hadn't actually entered Ludum Dare at all. There's like a more generous deadline, like a day later, where you can enter for jam games, which is what mine would have been, because I'd already used this grappling hook code that I didn't invent that weekend, and therefore wouldn't qualify for the 2-day competition, so I'd have to be in a 3-day one, and that ends Monday night, and that would have been possible if I'd really gone for it. But I think at some point I'd sort of decided I was just much more focused on making this thing good than I was about entering the competition or getting rated about it, and I just didn't feel right about actually putting it out yet until that thing was in. And so I had to get this level switching thing in, and once I had that thing in, it started to feel like a proper game. And so at that point I thought, okay, I'll release it, but just before I release it I'm going to send it to some testers. And so that's what I'm going to talk about next time.